I'm Jordan.
And I'm Rosanna.
And on this podcast, we explore how to take life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursue a life worth living together. Hello, and welcome to Season 5, Episode 6 of the Relentless Pursuit podcast, My Brother's Keeper.
My Brother's Keeper. So I'll admit that's a title that I like, although this is really a discussion about advocating for others and to what extent we should be doing that, to what extent we're responsible for kind of observing others' needs or the disparities around us and then taking action of some kind. So this came to my mind a few months ago. I was reading a book called So You Want to Talk About Race. And the book itself, I don't want to get into it too much, but I'm hot and cold on some of the things that are brought up, but it's very thought-provoking. So one of multiple thoughts that this book provoked in me was this idea of, like, to what extent do we take what we enjoy or are personally benefiting from in life, and then try to try to observe where that is lacking in someone else's life. And so I'll just read a quote from the book and then we'll get into our discussion. So this is what is in the book. She says, does your privilege, and so it's a book about race, and this chapter particularly talks specifically about privilege. So it says, does your privilege mean that you are more likely to sit in a manager's meeting while others are not? Ask why there are no disabled people in the room. Does your privilege mean that politicians are begging for your political support? Ask what they're going to do for people of color next time they knock on your door and hand you a flyer. Were you able to get a fancy private education as a child? Use your resulting financial security to support levies to improve public schools. Don't have to juggle work and children? Use the promotion that added flexibility helped you get to support employer-funded childcare and family leave programs, and have the flexibility in your schedule to attend a PTA meeting. At your next meeting, ask them to move future meetings to times that working parents can attend, and give parents other ways to contribute if they can't be there in person. And so that's in the midst of a whole chapter that's kind of talking about, what do you have that others do not, and is there a disparity that could potentially be addressed, if I were to summarize it. There's a lot of other context in the chapter as well, obviously, but that was, I think, the question that I thought, hey, that's worth exploring.
Okay, well, and we've discussed other things in the past. We've talked about in previous seasons, love thy neighbor. What does that look like to love the people in the community around you? We've discussed charity and giving. We've interviewed people like Dana Vivalli, who is the founder of Chesco's Heart, Shannon and Greg Booth from House of Shan, who, donate proceeds. Very charitable. Right. Very charitable. So how does advocacy really differ from charity or from loving people? What is this new slice of this topic that we're examining, and how is this then different than some of these others that we're talking about? Because this was your episode idea. I wasn't necessarily sold on it. I was like, wow, this sounds kind of boring. Here's 10 other ideas I'd rather record. So when we were kind of just discussing it, we're like, oh, what is an advocate? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I think those are all good questions, because I think of giving to charity as obviously something that we've talked about and explored before, and found value in doing more of that more intentionally this year. And so I think if you notice in this list that I shared from this text, there's nothing in it explicitly about giving money, donating money to a cause. I think that could be part of it, but I think of the idea of advocacy is bigger than just offering a check. I think it's more than maybe just offering time too, volunteering it. I think those are pieces, but it really strikes me as the idea of to what extent do I use my voice, or to what extent do I use something I have to help others who do not have that. I think, and we'll explore who is my brother and when am I not their keeper. But I think there's some choices people make, and I also think that there are, I'm thinking specifically of things I have of no effort of my own, and then things people do not have of no fault of their own. And then I think we could see a lot around us that Maybe there's an unequal, balance or priority given in certain ways that maybe if we just tried to be more attuned to, we could participate in.
Okay. And so then I started reading about this topic of being an advocate. And so there were two things that kind of came up. It's like, in order to be an advocate, you have to, like, first and foremost know, like, who you are as a person and what things are important to you. And that's including some of your basic needs on a daily basis. So when I thought of that, it's like, okay, like, who are we? Like, what do we stand for? What do we value? What's important to us? So I would say that we are advocates of and for public schools. Would you agree with that?
Oh, yeah.
Big time, right?
Well, I wouldn't say big time.
Well, that's kind of, I think, like how we think of
We
ourselves.
like conceptually
Right.
agree with that, but
So
what
the
makes
the
like
question
someone who
is
agrees?
right. So the question is, like, if that's true, like, what are we doing to be an advocate at our kids' schools, like at the local level, or even like public schools in general? And then that got me thinking even further, and I'm like, that's more than just like showing up for parent-teacher conferences. That's more than being a room mom at the Halloween party. That's more than selling the fundraising wrapping paper. So, like, when was the last time I attended a PTO meeting to see what the school and the parent organization is doing to, like, partner with the school to, like, move things forward, to make sure that kids are supported.
Right.
And so I think sometimes we'll say that we're an advocate of this or we're an advocate of that. But besides, like, some of those easy things that we do at the school, we're not really advocating for public schools or for our local public school.
Right. And I think of like a few givens. Like, I would say that you are not my brother, you're my wife. And so it's a given, like, we agreed to get married and take care of each other. And same thing with our kids. They're not my brother, they're my kids. And I have, like, a built-in obligation to be caring for them. So that's, like, step one. I'm not going to advocate for other people if I'm not taking care of what I need to at home. But those things are in place. And so now let's look at, it's really not just about, like, the school, but it's about, like, other people, or if it's a school, like, other people's kids, right? And trying to look at how does their circumstance compare to ours or to our children's, and is there a way that is there a disparity that we can observe and then work to rectify?
So then, like, a definition that I read about advocacy kind of broke it up like this. Advocacy is a process of supporting and enabling people to express their views, thoughts, and concerns, access information, advice, and guidance, and explore choices and options for services and care. Mm-hmm. So that means that all people in a society, so, like, not just the privileged or those who bark the loudest, everybody has their voice heard on issues that are important to them. Their rights are protected and promoted, and they have their views and wishes genuinely considered when decisions are being made about their lives.
Okay.
So it's like this platform for people being able to be open and honest about any issues or concerns they have, expressing their views, and then being given choices and options to help solve the disparity or the problems.
So not just using our voice to speak up on behalf of someone else, but it's helping them have voice as well.
Correct. And then, coming up with options that would help them.
Right. Okay. I think that's interesting. So I think we're getting closer. One of my questions was who is our brother? And I also, like, who are we responsible for in life? Goes along with that too. So really, I think based on this quote that I gave, it's suggesting that everyone is our brother. And it's like she lists a lot of different categories. I feel I have mixed feelings because on the one hand, I agree, like, all right, everyone to an extent, like we said, everyone is my neighbor. I feel like everyone in my sense is a brother, but there's a high limitation to how much advocacy we can really pour into everyone else around us.
Well, and that's a question I had. Can we be an advocate for many people and many things, or is it better just to be an advocate for one thing and then go all in?
Oh, that's my question too.
Well, going back to what you said, it's, and even what I said with that definition, where it's like people's views and wishes are considered when decisions are being made about their lives. People can explore choices and options for services and care. Like, we can be advocates for people, but our job isn't necessarily to solve all of their problems for them. It's helping give people a voice. It's helping give people options or getting them to explore, right? Like, their own ideas of what's not working and helping them move themselves towards that. It's not like just like a donate to the charity and then the charity takes care of it. It's, I think it's more about raising people up.
So it's like, in a sense, maybe this isn't what you're saying, but this is what I'm thinking is, in a sense, like any individual needs to at least be a co-participant in their own advocacy. Like, so we're not just talking about like giving a handout of one kind or another. Like, oh, here you go. Like, this will make your life better. Or here's something you have that I don't. They, first of all, kind of need to want that, which would require their voice to determine whether or not what we're trying to do on their behalf is worthwhile. But they also need to, I guess, be receptive of it, or like be willing to use that to an extent that is in fact benefiting them.
Yeah. And I have this list here, and this, I think, kind of maybe proves that to be true. It's like, well, what can an advocate do? So if I'm an advocate for someone or something, an advocate can support someone by listening to them, being non-judgmental, providing them with information and guidance, genuinely understanding someone else's concerns, exploring the options, helping you think about outcomes and consequences, respecting the decisions that you make, and helping you to communicate your thoughts, needs, and wishes. So it's almost like this coaching of sorts, where it's like, this is the problem I'm experiencing. How can someone kind of join with me to help me like figure out how to solve this problem? It's not like I need a solution from you, but like I need you to partner with me to like help me get more information, or provide me with some options, or show me some guidance in this direction.
Yeah. I think that's great. I think that's ideal, but in most circumstances, you're not going to find people who I think can maybe like articulate their needs so specifically. And in fact, it's probably like a result of feeling voiceless in a lot of circumstances, that like I think those things are good, but it takes a lot more work perhaps than we really realize. I mean, it'd be great if someone knocked on my door and like gave me a list of all those things, but it takes, I think those things sound like they take a lot more effort than rough. Like, that's why I read books like that. Like, So You Want to Talk About Race, right? Because that's my attempt to try to listen to someone who's not like me, who's using their voice to speak up on behalf of what they perceive as various needs or disparities. And I want to be a receptive ear, and then like then do some of the critical thinking myself, and weigh some of the multiple voices that I'm hearing and seeing where I can fit into that.
Okay. Well, the idea of advocacy and this list that I gave you just kind of reminded me of a local church in our area that does, it's like a toy drive for the holidays. And it serves the disadvantaged in the local surrounding communities.
Right.
And what they do is they set up almost like a toy store, like for kids for Christmas, in gyms in local area elementary schools. And they invite parents who are struggling, parents who don't make ends meet, that don't have like money to buy presents under the tree. And what they do is everybody in the church, like, whether it used to be that they donated all of these toys and then they were all there on display and they could come through and they could choose toys. And what would be a $20 or $25 toy was on sale to them for like $2, $4, $6.
They could still have the dignity of purchasing their child a gift, but it's like pennies on the dollar.
Right. So in that setting, that's people coming to advocate for the underprivileged, right? In a non-judgmental environment, knowing that this is a need, listening to parents being like, we understand that we don't have a lot, or that we can't afford it for whatever the circumstance. But we're gonna help you with this need by putting this all on for you, right? In a safe place. Like, this is a good option. We're not saying that you can have this for free. Like, you can come and you can pay like what's in your budget, but your kids can also feel like they're just like everybody else, that they get to have a Christmas, that they can say like, oh my gosh, I got a football, like, anywhere from like a football to a $40 game, that there's a need there, and we can help with that need. So very like quantifiably, physically, with those gifts, but you're advocating on behalf of the working poor.
Yeah. So sort of, and I think that's very good. But in my mind, advocacy goes one step further. Like, all right, so imagine you see someone at this Christmas toy store. Is the assumption that you're going to see them again next year? and the year after that, and the year. So what I'm thinking is like, is there? I think that's like a very like kind thing to do around the holidays. For me, advocacy would say, okay, like why do these individuals have less? Are these, and I don't know if this is the case, but like, are these individuals primarily people of color who are coming in? Well, what pattern am I noticing here? Then we can go one step further and say like, all right, there is like an income disparity here. What are the factors that are fueling that, and where can I use some of my resources or skills to bridge that disparity? Maybe not for them, but for their children.
Well, and I think that's part of it. So if they host this, right, and the kind of people that then go and work, right? So people set this up, people work as like, shoppers, people help wrap the gifts. So you could buy the gifts and someone's like, there's a team of people there to wrap it and whatever. Part of it is you're making connections with these people and you're listening to their story and you're hearing where they're come from. And, I've heard stories from this of like, I've been out of work for this long, or I was laid off due to, COVID, or like, okay, so what's the issue? And it's like almost connecting people, be like, hey, like I know of somewhere higher. Like, it's like, you can host kind of like a charitable act, but then it's your job as like that participant in it. Like, now what do you want to do with this? Like, how do you want to connect with the people who are there? Like, you could simply hand them a toy, right, in exchange for dollars, or wrap their gift, or listen to their story. But if you want to be an advocate, then how do you connect with them? Do you leave with a phone number and start figuring it out together, or connect them with someone who's hiring, or like whatever that might be, right? Or it's a single dad, or like, does he know other single dads that like could mentor him or coach him on how to do this better? Like, so I think it's all about your intention behind some of these good acts.
Yeah, and so that's what I think about too. And I'm not judging, but I'm only like questioning, because you and I feel like are on the like very entry level. Like we'll give to charity and we'll try to like help those around us when we notice something. So I just wonder if there's more, if there's something already happening that we could be a part of, or if there's something that I just don't want to miss the boat and think like, what, I lived very comfortably in the bubble that I created for myself, and my kids are doing well, and I took care of the people I'm obligated to. But am I a good person when I'm taking care of people I'm not obligated to?
Well, and I think that's an interesting question, but what does that mean? And what does that mean to you?
Yeah.
Like, sometimes I feel like I tell you, like, I feel like I take care of everybody.
Right.
Just because of like, that's more like my disposition. And so it's not always strangers, but it's, people in extended family or friends, or in the way that I show up for them, or spend time with them, that I constantly thinking of others. So does it have to be a stranger that has some kind of disparity because of like their race or their gender or their financial status? Or can it be, emotionally with someone who is broken in your family because of something, and the way that you help move them forward?
Yeah.
Does it have to be for a cause, or for, what's the word, a minority population?
Right. I think of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. You remember George and Lenny?
I do remember
Gee,
them.
George, I like rabbits. They're so soft. So that's a story. If you haven't read this, you could probably read the whole thing in maybe an hour or two. I recommend it. But it's a great story that actually I think explores this question, because you have George, who's an intelligent, like just, I would say a normal,
Capable,
healthy
able-bodied.
adult. Yeah. But he's also taking care of what seems to be just like his friend, who is very strong, but also very mentally disabled. And he and George is taking care of Lenny throughout the text of this piece. And to what extent is George responsible for doing that? Like, everybody in the book questions, like, why does a guy like you like take care of someone like Lenny? Like, you don't need to be doing that. And George says, I know, but I do. Even when Lenny gets into hot water, like, George shares those miseries with him as well, like for the sake of continuing to take care of him. So he's not really helping. That's like the extent of the help that character can give. He's like, I can help one person, and it's going to be Lenny, right? So I think that there's obviously a limit. I've heard people for different causes, especially over the past year, say like, this cause, it's everyone's cause. Everyone needs to get behind this, or everyone is a contributor to this, right? And I question that a little bit, because I think that there's hundreds of different causes and disparities, and just even like people that we may personally know And it becomes very difficult to give all of our time and attention to, I would say, to more than one, really, if we're doing it right. So I think that there definitely is a limit to the extent that we can like really advocate. So I guess for me and you, I'd love to explore like what's one area. Let's take care of of each other and of our kids and of the people in our lives that we ought to be taking care of. But what's one area where we can use the skills and resources that we have to speak up on someone else's behalf that we're not obligated to?
Yeah. Well, and it also begs the questions like, well, how do we do that? And I think it's not, there's not like a right or wrong way to do it. It's just the decision that you're going to try and do it. And then the decision is, what does that look like for us right now? Mm-hmm. If you think of whether it's charity or loving people, like whatever it is, I mean, just life in general, raising kids or your career, or your business, like nothing is a sprint. Most everything is a marathon. So if you're trying to be intentional about it, right, it's not about going all in, like, right, to whether it's one cause or one group of people.
You
like,
get burned out within a year and then.
Correct. So it's more about making the decision as to what's like the right way or the right cause or the right group to help advocate on its behalf, and then to kind of probably set like manageable goals.
Right.
To like keep yourself kind of like, if we say this is important, if we say we value this, or if we say these are the kind of people we want to be, this is what it's going to look like for us. Mm-hmm. And, it's not like we're going to get it all right or do it right, but then it causes you to stop and think. It causes you to plan. Like, what does then this look like? And it doesn't have to be daily or weekly, but like on a monthly mm-hmm. or on a bi-monthly or like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And really thinking about it. So it's not like, oh, we're going to advocate and then we just go, like, just like how you set your New Year's goals or intentions or your work priorities or your business goals. Same kind of thing, where it's like you kind of have the mindset to kind of plan and prep a little bit.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking of Schindler's List right now, because at the ending of it, there's a very powerful scene where, Oscar Schindler had spent a lot of money and...
Can I say that I've actually never watched it?
What?
I have not.
I swear we've watched it together. All right, we'll put that, not that it's a Christmas movie, but we'll watch it this holiday season, okay?
We'll pop some popcorn with
Sure.
some hot chocolate and watch it with the kids.
Wow, okay. But at the end of it, and this isn't spoiling anything, but there's a powerful scene where, he's saved, I don't know, maybe like a few hundred Jews from execution. But at the end of it, the war is over, and he... looks at a ring that he's wearing, and he's like, this ring, like, why did I keep this ring? I could have sold this ring and used the money to save one more life. And then he looks at his car. He's like, I could have sold this car and used the money to save a few more lives. And he just like breaks down in tears, realizing that like these little things that he kept, like he saved like so many people, but these little things, like he just looks at with such regret and lamentation, realizing that real lives have been lost that were within his power to save. And everyone is like, no, like, you're a hero, man, like, buck up. And I wonder if there's a piece of that for us as well. Like, and I talk about this a lot, like just how comfortable and how happy we are and how much we spend on other things that just continue to, I think, I would say, like, make us happy or provide for us materially. Will I, at the end of life, like, look back and be like, man, like, we spent X amount of dollars, X amount of time doing these things for ourselves. Will I regret some of that because it could have been used in a way that could have improved someone else's life or improved society to some extent?
And that's a big question, right? Because then, I mean, you think about Schindler's List, and then you think about, like, right, if I had,
And I'm not saving people from the Holocaust, but
right.
Like, are there, material disadvantages that, I'm just kind of sitting around either blind to?
Are you willing to say no to yourself to say yes to someone else?
Yeah.
That's a big question.
And where do you draw the line?
Correct.
Right. I mean, you don't want to like sell everything you have and put your children at a disadvantage because you're giving all of your time and attention to, someone else or something else.
Right. So, I mean, determining what that looks like for you and how much is a healthy amount and what you can commit to.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's like a deep question. That's not something that you listen to a podcast or we have one conversation together and maybe you have the answer. I think it's like this conversation is just like then the first in a series of conversations we have to have about what does advocacy look like for us? How do we want this to be a part of our life?
Yeah, I feel like step one is like living with our eyes open a little bit more, and like I think that like noticing and then listening, like you had said, right before we just like dive in to something, or maybe there's someone that we respect and who's already like maybe a few steps ahead of it. We can follow their lead as well. Like, hey, you're doing something kind of cool. Tell me more about this. Let me come alongside you.
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of opportunities if you're looking for them. But I think it's harder to see those opportunities when you're stuck in the day-to-day. And when the day-to-day is concerning like you and your own, right? We can be so focused on just those things that we're kind of blind to maybe some of the opportunities that are really like right outside our front door.
Right. I have a quote here. So I was thinking about like the idea of like America, and I think we have some competing mentalities. That like we have a very strong like individualistic mindset. Like I take care of me, you take care of you. Like we're gonna lift ourselves up by our bootstraps, and this is the country where what's the saying? Like you can be anyone you want to be. You can do anything that you want to do if you just work hard enough. So that's one. I think that's one train of thinking culturally. But then if we look at the reality, we realize that sounds really nice. It sounds idealistic. But what are some of the genuine factors that play into that? Is it really feasible that every individual has equal access to the American dream, whatever they may be dreaming? And so I have a quote here from Jonathan Winthrop. This is from a sermon.
All of your quotes and
that he
references.
Gave. This is where my mind goes. So this is a sermon given in 1630 to a group of colonists. They were actually literally on the coast prior to landing in Massachusetts in 1630.
Is that Plymouth Rock?
No,
Somewhere different.
No, this was these are other folks. This is Massachusetts Bay Colony.
Oh,
yeah. So in this sermon, again, they're thinking of like this is very different circumstances, but again, like we think of originally, like what was the concept surrounding American community. So there's this quote that's here. He told his people, "We must be willing to abridge ourselves of our superfluities for the supply of others' necessities." So that's what we were talking about, right? What do you have that's extra? Can you shed those extras to supply others of their needs? We must uphold a familiar commerce together in all meekness, gentleness, patience, and liberality. We must delight in each other, make others' conditions our own, rejoice together, mourn together, labor and suffer together, always having before our eyes our commission and community in the work as members of the same body. So he's talking about a few hundred people in a town where they're like literally, for all sakes and purposes, in the middle of nowhere, right? To what extent does this hold true? To what extent do we want to like rejoice together, mourn together, work together, abridge ourselves of our superfluities for the provision of someone else?
I just gave you a sideways glance because I was like, meh. This is my yard and my property and my space. That's your yard and your property and your space. Yeah, I mean, like, right. I feel like there used to be more of that communal mentality. We've talked about my family and coming here. And when they came here, like, my family lived with an uncle and they were all together to, like, help, my grandparents find jobs so that they could support their family so that eventually they could have their own home. And, like, it was this, like, I will do anything for you so that you could have what I have.
Yeah. Well, sort of, but that's your family too. So it's like that's mine. That's my huddle.
True. But even now you would think like some families probably wouldn't do that for their own family.
Yeah, maybe.
So, it's like, so we can see like how that like over time, right? Because you said that was 16 something and I'm talking about 60 something. So, it's like you go from there where it's like everybody's all in, family or not, to, okay, now it's kind of stretched out over time and a lot of that is lost. So yeah, I mean, there are people who don't want to help people who are disadvantaged or underprivileged because they're like, well, it's not my problem.
Yeah.
Like, you've created that problem for yourself. I'm not going to help you with that. And there are other people who are happy to help. So it's just like, how do we get on into the same mindset that everybody matters and everybody's kids matter, right? And everybody should have access to the same things that we have, like clean drinking water, free education. Like, you know, that's what it's like here, but that's not what it's like everywhere. So like, how do you convince other people that that's the way that it should be?
Yeah. Well, actually, I mean, you brought up something too. Are there any circumstances where we would say someone is not our brother? Right? Because sometimes we get into the mentality of like, well, your circumstances, whatever they are, the current disparity that we're speaking of was brought about by choices that you made, right? So I can't help you because really, like, you need to make better choices. Like, does that, in a sense, like disqualify someone from?
I don't even want to answer that question. I mean, like, you're not, like, you get into things, I mean, that's just.
Well, these are some of the.
I think those are the lines
that you can get mired in.
Right, and that you draw for yourself. But like, where is your heart? What is your intention? What do you hope to do with your voice and with your talents and with your wisdom and with the power you have to help somebody else? Like, that's, yeah, we could say like, yep, you don't qualify. You don't, like, you can do that, but then maybe that's a hard issue for you.
Maybe. Or I still think like, all right, like if we have a cause, then as much as other people or other causes or other problems may be equally important, like realistically, there's a limit that you have to draw for yourself because you can't devote your entire life to every single cause. So it's like, I'm gladly, I can probably say I'm devoted to cause A, and I know like cause B and C and D are out there as well. But like, honestly, I can't devote more time and attention to those other things.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can, maybe that's wrong though. Maybe you can be an advocate for other people and not in the fact that you're like driving the bus on something or are a key player, but like, how do you talk about certain people or groups and their experiences? Are you there to help, like, to help be a part of a positive conversation, or are you there to continually belittle and chop people down? You know? So I think a lot of it has to do with like the power that you have in your speech and what you think about people and how you spread that with others.
Yeah. All right. So I'm thinking in terms of takeaways, it sounded like we're thinking like step one is really just to live more with our eyes open and just pay more attention to like things that are worthy of advocating on behalf of. And once we identify those, then listening and following some of the other things that you said.
Yeah. Did you want me to read that list?
Yeah.
Okay. Advocacy is a process of supporting and enabling people. We can support them by listening, being non-judgmental, providing them with information and guidance, genuinely understanding their concerns, exploring their options, helping them think about outcomes and consequences, respecting their decisions, and helping them to communicate their thoughts, needs, and wishes. So, I mean, to me, it's almost like my brother's keeper, right? Like when you think of my brother's keeper, it's like being a good friend. In a sense, if you like kind of boil it down, if you think of like the George and Lenny example or like Schindler's List, right? Like he's being a good person, he's being a good friend. And it's by doing some of those things. And sometimes it's literally and physically giving and sharing and taking and leading. And it's some of those things. I think it continues to build. But if entry level is like listening to someone who has a problem or is at a disadvantage and not judging them, right? Oh, because you made this choice, I'm now not going to help you. It's, you know, kind of having this right attitude, like, let me help you figure this out, regardless if you've made some bonehead moves.
Right. There's always something, we may not have all the answers, but there's always, I think for every person, like some degree of resource or skill or experience that could then be gifted in a way to improve someone else's circumstance too.
Right, a connection to someone else who may be able to help. Being a resource for someone, really.
Okay. Well, I hope this is the first of many conversations that we have to explore this, mainly because I think a lot of the purpose of the podcast is I don't want to get to the end of life and realize that we missed some big things along the way. And I feel like this might be one of those things where if I want to think of myself as a good person, This is probably, I hate to say it this way, but like a box that's not fully checked yet, in a sense.
Well, and I think that's the other part of the podcast is figuring out what those boxes are.
Yeah.
And moving you closer to checking them. And it's not a simple answer, and it's not a simple solution, and it's not one conversation, but it's the series of refining yourself and pursuing something that's more than who you are today.
All right. Well, we thank you, listeners, for joining us in this conversation. We hope some of you are indeed advocates, or may perhaps inspired by some of the exploration of this that Rosanna and I have just shared. So give us some guidance and some of your own experience so that we can learn from you. And if you feel like there may be someone else who would be interested in the idea of advocacy or might be inspired by listening to this conversation, go ahead and share this with them. And of course, don't hesitate to swing on over to iTunes, leave a 5-star rating and a glowing review. We would appreciate that a great deal.
And a glowing review. It's quite the voice there.
There you go.
Thank you guys for listening. We hope you have a great week, and we'll see you again next week.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to today's show. We hope you will use this conversation as a starting point for your own. We hope you're encouraged to think and act more intentionally.
If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, therelentlesspursuitpodcast.com, where you can find notes on today's show, plus additional blog posts, and you can subscribe to our free members list.
Please subscribe, leave a review, and share with your friends.
Facebook and Instagram are 2 great places to connect with us for daily doses of our quotable quotes, behind the scenes, and real-time photos, videos, and challenges.
Until next time, let us know how you are taking life off autopilot
and relentlessly pursuing what matters.